From Fox News, it's The Campaign with Bret Baier.
President Trump signed an executive order and 3 memorandum that address the need for unemployment benefits, eviction moratoriums, delaying student loan payments, and a temporary delay in payroll tax liability. Came under a lot of criticism, both from the left and some on the right. This after negotiations fell flat in Congress last week over a new coronavirus stimulus bill. There's speculation, obviously, a lot of it, that these actions may face legal challenges in the courts, all happening as we are less than a week away from the Democratic convention. Our socially distant panel anxiously awaiting to discuss all of that, plus Joe Biden's vice presidential nominee pick finally made. But first, Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy has been following all of this on the campaign trail.
The challenges of vetting and then rolling out a running mate during a global pandemic are on display in a new photo that shows Joe Biden and Kamala Harris speaking to each other earlier today on a Zoom call. They have not yet served together, but Biden says he's felt connected to her for a long time through his late son with this, quote, "I first met Kamala through my son, Beau. They were both attorneys general at the same time. He had enormous respect for her and her work. I thought a lot about that as I made this decision. There is no one's opinion I valued more than Beau's, and I'm proud to have Kamala standing with me on this campaign." The Trump campaign, meanwhile, is pushing back with this. Not long ago, Kamala Harris called Joe Biden a racist and asked for an apology she never received. Clearly, phony Kamala will abandon her own morals as well as try to bury her record as a prosecutor in order to appease the anti-police extremists controlling the Democrat Party. The 55-year-old Harris is the only black woman and the only South Asian American woman to be on a major party's ticket and is set to debate Mike Pence this fall. She has been out of the race since December when she dropped out. And when Harris was still a Biden rival, her campaign launch in Oakland drew one of the largest crowds of anybody in the field all year, by far larger than anything Biden himself drew at any point pre-COVID-19 lockdown. And out of the 24 Democrats who debated this cycle, she created the most viral moment, surprising Biden with a challenge to his record on busing. But months later, she was telling reporters to leave Joe alone. And this day, her becoming Joe Biden's running mate might come as a surprise to voters who attended Harris events, because in 2019, when she was asked about a report that someday maybe she'd be Biden's running mate, she tried to turn the tables.
I think that Joe Biden would be a great running mate. As vice president, he's proven that he knows how to do the job.
But it's not Harris-Biden, it's Biden-Harris, and the ticket is going to make their first appearance together here in Wilmington tomorrow.
Peter, thanks. Former Vice President Biden has announced his running mate will be Senator Kamala Harris of California. There was speculation that Senator Harris was the favored candidate for VP nominee after months of vetting. On Tuesday, the Biden campaign announced that Harris would be the VP nominee, calling her, quote, a fearless fighter for the little guy and one of the country's finest public servants. On top of this news, the Democratic National Committee has revealed a list of speakers who will participate in the convention programming, including, in addition to Harris, obviously, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Barack and Michelle Obama, as well as many of the former vice president's 2020 Democratic presidential primary opponents. On Monday, President Trump announced he has narrowed the location for his nomination acceptance to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, or the White House. These conventions, of course, will take on a new look, the backdrop of the coronavirus pandemic in the United States, with the virus creating contentious debate across the nation about what's best for the economy and for students this fall. Not only students, but college football is up in the air. We'll start there with our panel, Josh Kraushaar. He's political editor for National Journal, USA Today, Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page, and Democratic strategist and syndicated talk radio host Leslie Marshall. Okay, Senator Kamala Harris, the choice is made. Susan, thoughts?
Not a surprise. She was the most likely pick from the start. There was a process that Biden people did a good job, I think, of keeping a lid on leaks about the process. But we end up where we thought we began, with a candidate who is a female, who is African American, who is also the first Asian American to be on a national ticket, the daughter of immigrants, and someone with history as a prosecutor. So this is the candidate most vetted among the ones that were seen as the most serious contenders, and in many ways the safest choice I think Biden could have made.
Yeah. Josh, not seen as the best campaigner, obviously out early in the presidential race, but to Susan's point, vetted, knows the campaign deal, even in a strange coronavirus setting. The biggest question was whether Joe Biden could get over some of the tension at the beginning of the primary at that debate stage.
Yeah, and I think most politicians are able to overcome any campaign attacks. We've seen this with Reagan and Bush and Kennedy and Johnson. There's a long history of primary rivals uniting on a ticket for the presidency. I think the bigger issue here is that Harris was one of the few contenders who was ready to become president, not just because she ran for the presidency this year, but because she served as senator and state attorney general. She had the executive and political experience that you normally would have for such a high profile position. A lot of the other candidates, whether you're talking about Karen Bass or Val Demings or a first term governor like Gretchen Whitmer, just didn't have the type of resume that you would consider to be ready for prime time, ready for the presidency. And I think ultimately Harris was one of the few people, maybe Susan Rice was the other contender on the short list, that had that high level government experience that usually is suited for that vice presidential role.
Leslie, I want to get your thoughts overall on the race, but also, on this pick, but also, one of the vulnerabilities on the progressive side of the Democratic Party for Joe Biden in the primary was his support and push for the 1994 crime bill. Kamala Harris has a history as California AG and also as a prosecutor at the San Francisco District Attorney's Office and the District Attorney, eventually the top job there, that comes under criticism from the left of the left. Does that provide any problems?
It might. That's true. I wrote about that in my piece today, the good, the bad, and the ugly of this. And that's part of the bad, not with this pick, but for Kamala Harris. And the reason is, Brett, if you look at as Attorney General, things that she did with regard to, police brutality, capital punishment, imprisonments of individuals that, were later found out to be innocent. She actually has been on both sides. And so it gets confusing, but she is not viewed, even though she touts herself as progressive, by the progressive faction of my party, the Democratic Party, as being progressive enough. And that could be an issue. But I do want to say, Brett, I hope I get something for this, because with Candidate Casino on a special report, every time I was putting my bet down, I gave her the most. And the reason is because she does hit the ground running. She is the best pick. She does tick all the boxes. And if, which he might be, a one-term president, Joe Biden, she could actually run for president, she is ready.
I might give you the green visor, for the dealer and see if that works. Susan, there are, potential pitfalls for Kamala Harris, and she saw some of that in the presidential run. In other words, one of the things the Trump campaign's already hitting her on is that she's not authentic. They call her phony. But Democratic voters, if you polled them, they didn't use that word, but they said she couldn't figure out whether she was the progressive lane or the moderate lane, and that, in an essence, she couldn't make the elevator pitch of what her campaign was.
Yeah, I think that's right. She wasn't the very best campaigner. She had a great first debate. It ended up costing her, because what made her so effective was her attack on Joe Biden, with whom she's now made amends. But, in a way, I think her weakness is her strength in the role of vice president. The fact that she's not the most liberal candidate, the most progressive candidate he could have picked, that makes it more difficult, I think, for President Trump and the Republicans to paint this as a far left ticket that's taking the country to socialism. And the fact that she has been not so clearly defined as a candidate may make it easier for her to take on the coloration of whatever she needs to take on to be Biden's vice president. Being the vice presidential candidate, it is different from being the presidential candidate. You are the second fiddle. And the things that she's going to be able to bring to this ticket, I think, are some energy, a new generation. And I think the fact that she's African-American is going to help energize African-American voters, even those who are more liberal than she is.
Yeah, Josh, and she definitively brings sort of that attack dog mentality that we've seen for some VP choices. I assume the Biden campaign saw her performance in some of these hearings where Trump administration officials have been before the Senate committee she sits on and the grilling that she's.
To listen to more of the campaign, go to foxnewspodcast.com.